Welcome, students, to a new section of notes titled The Scientific Revolution. This is for world history. Let's begin. Scientific revolution. What are the main causes? Well, first we have the Renaissance that's going to inspire that spirit of curiosity. If you remember Da Vinci, he was that Renaissance man, kind of a scientist himself. And so there's going to be this curiosity that's sparked due to the Renaissance of changing how we do things. You're also going to have the Reformation that's going to challenge accepted ways of thinking put forth by the Catholic Church. If you remember, the Catholic Church had certain set ways of thinking, and if you disagreed with that or challenged it, they would excommunicate you. So the Reformation really is that first movement that challenges the Catholic Church's teachings, and so it encourages, inspires scientists to do the same thing, to not just accept what's been believed for the centuries. There's also going to be a transition from medieval thinking to modern thinking. And so the scientific ideas from the Greeks, from the medieval times, the Dark Ages, there's going to be a rethinking of those platforms. And so instead of just believing those things because we've always believed them, they're going to start to look at the scientific rationale of why things exist. And then we also have the age of exploration that's going to open the door to other truths in other lands. As you see right here, the two different hemispheres. You have the Western Hemisphere on the left and the Eastern Hemisphere on the right. And so as explorers are starting to go to new lands, there's going to be different ways of doing things that are really going to open up for the scientific development to change. The greater world really challenged previous assumptions, as mentioned before. The printing press is really going to lead to the spread of new ideas. And so as maps are going to be more readily available and cheaper, instead of people hand drawing these maps, they're going to be able to print them in mass quantity. Also books written on tales of other lands are really going to spread a lot of different ideas and curiosities that are going to help the scientific revolution to come about. New approach to the scientific method is going to happen during this time period as well. If you remember, the scientific method was originally proposed by Aristotle, and Aristotle was revered as total truth, and nobody really questioned his ideas. But then the scientific revolution comes along and people start to question those previous assumptions. So things like the scientific method here, where we have observation, hypothesis, experimentation, analysis, and interpretation of the data, usually including math. And you'll see a lot of math in this scientific revolution. Let's look at some of the scientists. Now, Nicholas Copernicus is going to present his heliocentric theory. That is where the sun is the center of the solar system, not the Earth. The medieval way of thinking was that the Earth was the center. It kind of made sense to people back then. But when Copernicus starts to really study these things, he really starts to challenge that. But then you'll have Brahe and Kepler that will build on Copernicus' findings with larger amounts of mathematical calculations. So you have these two individuals that will take Copernicus' findings and fine-tune it. Copernicus believed that the sun was the center of the universe. They're going to take that, but actually realize that the rotation of the planets is an elliptical or oval shape, not a circle as Copernicus had believed. Galileo, his observations is going to further build on Copernicus' findings as well. And using those telescopes, Telescopes were invented before this, but Galileo's telescopes were the best of the times. They could see a lot further. Picture of Galileo there. More scientists. The Catholic Church attempted to prevent questioning of church's teachings. Again, remember that the Catholic Church had a primacy on truth. They wouldn't allow people to read the Bible or to discover for themselves. And so anything that went against their teaching or challenged their teachings, they felt was a threat. Francis Bacon is going to introduce the empiricism, which is the experimental method that we use today. That it's not just about believing what you've learned, but actually experimenting. We're also going to have Descartes, who is going to push to arriving to truth through math and logic. That there's a mathematical way things exist, and there's a logical way things exist. Descartes famously said, "I think, therefore I am." So using logic to prove different scientific rationales. Isaac Newton is going to introduce several scientific laws, such as the law of gravity. And so during this time period, you're going to have certain laws, thermodynamic laws, scientific laws, that are going to be the basis for other scientific developments. Picture of Isaac Newton there. It's probably before the apple hit him in the head. Newton is known as the father of calculus. And calculus uses a lot of derivatives, and so it's the higher form of math. And he's going to publish that in his book, Principia. So what are some legacies? New scientific instruments like the microscope, mercury barometer, thermometer. Those are going to be different instruments that are going to be developed during this time period. Remember that the telescope looks far, but the microscope looks for things that are tiny. Medicine, greater understanding of the human body, vaccines, circulatory system. So they're going to start to realize that there's more complexity to the human body than was believed before. Things like vaccines, that if you give a little bit of a disease to somebody, they can build an immunity to it. So when the actual disease comes along, they already have the immunity to it. The circular system, that the heart is a pump. Those were things that the scientific revolution started to understand a little bit better. You also have chemistry. Robert Boyle challenges Aristotle's view of the elements, and the modern chemistry periodic table that we have today is because of Robert Boyle there. Another individual with great hair. And the scientific method, of course, as we've mentioned before. Big legacies during the scientific revolution. But it's not just science in the traditional sense, but also challenging of old belief systems. It attempted to apply scientific principles to human nature, that there is a political science or a social science to how individuals act and think. Political challenges through the Enlightenment is going to happen as well. And as the scientific revolution is in swing, you're also going to have the Enlightened movement there as well. Many of the American Renaissance men would be scientists, but also political thinkers as well. Thank you for taking these notes.